We live in a time that worships control. From curated social media feeds to life plans broken down into quarterly goals, the modern world is obsessed with eliminating uncertainty. Somewhere along the way, this obsession gave birth to a seductive fantasy, the problem-free life. It's the idea that if we just work hard enough, optimize enough, meditate enough, or buy the right course, we can reach a place where pain, confusion, and conflict no longer touch us. This isn't just false, it's dangerous. Because what it hides is a subtle but profound denial of life itself. To live, truly and deeply, is to open oneself to the unpredictable, to the inconvenient, to the rawness of being. The modern promise of a life without problems isn't a promise of peace, it's a promise of numbness. And it leaves many chasing shadows, wondering why they feel so empty even when everything seems fine. The fantasy of a problem-free existence often starts as a survival instinct. After all, who wouldn't want to avoid suffering? Pain hurts, loss wounds, uncertainty scares. But the trouble begins when avoidance becomes a lifestyle. The more we try to structure life around the absence of problems, the more fragile we become in the face of reality. Minor setbacks feel catastrophic, simple conversations become confrontations, and anything that doesn't match our curated expectations feels like failure. This isn't resilience, it's brittleness. And it often leads people into a cycle of blame and shame. Why am I still struggling? Why am I not like those people who seem to have it all figured out? What they don't see is that even those people are quietly breaking under the same illusion. As Viktor Frankl once suggested, suffering ceases to be suffering when we find meaning in it. But if our entire worldview is based on avoiding it, we'll never arrive at that possibility. It's also worth asking, where did this dream of a frictionless life come from? In part, it's a product of consumer culture. We're constantly bombarded with messages that promise ease and instant gratification. Buy this, follow that, download this app, and suddenly, your problems vanish. But this messaging is not designed to liberate us. It's designed to keep us dependent, restless, always one step away from the next fix. It feeds on our discomfort and sells us a version of life that's airbrushed beyond recognition. The philosopher Byung-Chul Han writes about the fatigue of the modern self, burned out not from doing too much, but from constantly trying to be happy in the right way. We aren't allowed to be confused, or sad, or lost, not even for a day. And this turns the most human experiences into signs of personal failure. It isolates us, making us feel as though we're broken for simply being human. What if the real problem isn't the presence of problems, but our relationship to them? If we can start by accepting that difficulty is not the exception but the rule, an integral part of the fabric of life, then we open ourselves to something far richer than ease. We open ourselves to depth. Italo Calvino once said that lightness is not the opposite of heaviness, but a way of bearing it. Likewise, peace is not the absence of storms, but the skill of sailing through them. The pursuit of a perfect life without problems is a dead end, but the decision to face life as it is, with its messiness, its contradictions, its quiet beauty, is the beginning of something much more authentic. The sooner we let go of the illusion, the sooner we can build something real, not a life without pain, but a life that includes it, and is still worth living. What if the word problem itself is the problem? We rarely pause to examine how deeply language shapes our inner experience. The moment something disrupts our plans, our peace, or our expectations, we label it as a problem, a word that immediately suggests something wrong, something that must be fixed or erased. But life doesn't work like a math equation, and not everything that hurts is a mistake. In truth, some of the most meaningful transformations in life emerge from what we initially saw as misfortunes. A lost job that leads to a more authentic path. A heartbreak that finally forces us to meet ourselves. A mistake that becomes a source of wisdom. When we call something a problem, we often declare war on it. But what if, instead, we could learn to sit with it? To listen, rather than resist? That subtle shift, from seeing the problem as an enemy to seeing it as a teacher, can completely reshape how we live. It's not about romanticizing pain or pretending that suffering is always noble. It's about understanding that our greatest suffering often comes not from the situation itself, but from the narrative we build around it. two people can go through the same event, losing a friend, failing a project, facing rejection, and experience completely different realities. One sees it as a sign that they're cursed, that life is unfair, that nothing works. The other sees it as part of a larger story still unfolding. The Stoics, especially Epictetus, understood this well. They taught that events themselves are neutral, it is our judgment that gives them meaning. It's not things that disturb us, but our opinions about things, he wrote. So when we redefine what a problem is, we begin reclaiming our power. We stop reacting blindly, and we start choosing how we interpret, how we respond, how we grow. The event remains the same, but the life that grows from it can be completely different. There's also a subtle danger in how problems are presented to us in the modern world, as interruptions, as bugs in the system of our lives. We are taught to see life as a straight line, where everything should flow smoothly if we do the right things. But life is not a machine, it's an ecosystem. And in ecosystems, disruption is part of evolution. Forests burn and regrow. Rivers change course. Even stars collapse into black holes to create new galaxies. The idea that everything should always be in order, comfortable, and controlled is not only unrealistic, it's deeply inhuman. We need friction. We need the unexpected. Not because it's pleasant, but because it sharpens us, stretches us, humbles us. A challenge is not a malfunction in the design of life, it is the design. And once we begin to see that, our daily struggles stop feeling like signs of failure and start looking like invitations to live more consciously. When we stop resisting problems, we begin participating in life more honestly. The fear of problems shrinks. The sense of failure dissolves. And suddenly, we realize that most problems aren't roadblocks at all, they're the road itself. This is not to suggest that pain disappears. But it becomes bearable, meaningful, even beautiful, in its own way. Viktor Frankl believed that suffering without meaning leads to despair, but suffering with meaning can elevate us. Redefining our problems is an act of inner rebellion against the narratives we've been fed. It allows us to move from victimhood to authorship, from helplessness to humility. And above all, it invites us to live with the depth and presence that only comes when we stop wishing for a life without struggle, and start walking with grace through the one we already have. After we stop labeling every challenge as a personal failure, we find ourselves at a powerful turning point, the moment where we begin to accept what we cannot change. But this kind of acceptance is not resignation. It's not about giving up or passively enduring injustice. It's something far more courageous, what some call radical acceptance. It means facing life as it is, not as we wish it to be. It means choosing to meet reality on its own terms. Most of our suffering, paradoxically, does not come from pain itself, but from the constant resistance we offer to it. We brace ourselves, argue with what's already happened, try to mentally rewrite the past or control the uncontrollable. This resistance is exhausting. Radical acceptance, then, is not weakness. It is the act of dropping the illusion of control and stepping into a deeper kind of power, the power to be fully present, even in the middle of chaos. The modern world doesn't reward this kind of wisdom. We're trained to manage, optimize, and predict everything. Control is the currency of modern life, yet the more we try to control, the more anxious we become. We try to control how people see us, how the day will unfold, how the future will treat us. And when something unexpected happens, and it always does, we treat it as an emergency, rather than part of life. This is where radical acceptance becomes revolutionary. Imagine being able to look at a setback and say, "This is not what I wanted, but I will live it fully." That doesn't mean you don't act, protest, or improve what can be changed. It simply means you stop fighting what is already here. As Epictetus put it, make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. In a world obsessed with fixing and escaping, the quiet strength of acceptance is a form of inner rebellion. But how do we actually practice radical acceptance when things fall apart? How do we face loss, betrayal, illness, or the small daily disappointments that pile up silently? It begins with presence. Noticing what you're feeling without rushing to edit or analyze it. letting the wave of emotion rise and fall. It continues with honesty, naming the reality, even when it hurts. This is happening. This is difficult. This is out of my hands. These simple phrases break the spell of denial and bring us back to solid ground. Acceptance also requires humility, the humility to understand that life is vast, and we are not in charge of most of it. This humility is not defeat, it's relief. Because when we stop believing we must fix everything, we begin to breathe again. We begin to listen. And often, in that quiet space, new forms of wisdom emerge, forms that can't be forced, only received. Perhaps the most beautiful part of radical acceptance is that it frees us to love life as it is, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. There's a strange paradox here: the more we accept what we cannot control, the more peace we find. Not because the storm disappears, but because we're no longer trying to stop the rain, we're learning to dance in it. Viktor Frankl wrote that when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Radical acceptance is that transformation. It's the shift from living in resistance to living in relationship, with our limitations, with others, with reality. And in this relationship, we find something far deeper than comfort, we find meaning. We stop waiting for the perfect conditions to live, and instead, begin living fully, even with the cracks, even in the dark. Because that, in the end, is where the light gets in. Once we've stopped resisting life's natural turbulence, we come to an essential realization: peace isn't something we stumble upon. It's something we build. Not outside, but within. And just like any structure, this inner space requires architecture, a deliberate design of how we think, what we value, what we allow in. Many people live in mental chaos not because the world is too loud, but because they've never been taught how to organize their inner life. They absorb everything: the expectations of others, the noise of social media, the urgency of what doesn't matter. And so every problem feels overwhelming, because there's no internal filter, no foundation. The first step in building this architecture is clarity. Clarity about what matters, what doesn't, and what we're here for. Without clarity, we chase every problem as if it were urgent. With clarity, we begin to prioritize, to protect our attention, to live intentionally, even when life is uncertain. Clarity isn't something you find once and keep forever, it's something you cultivate daily. It grows in silence, in reflection, in the small but honest questions we ask ourselves: what truly matters to me? What kind of life am I building, even in the face of discomfort? It's easy to get lost in 1,000 obligations that were never truly ours. But when we clarify our values, a subtle shift happens. The noise doesn't disappear, but it loses its power. We begin to see which problems are worth our energy, and which ones are distractions in disguise. With clarity comes a sense of proportion. Suddenly, not every difficulty is a crisis, not every request deserves a yes, not every emotion needs to be acted on. The philosopher Simone Weil once said that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. And that begins with offering attention to your own life. Not in a self-centered way, but in a rooted, honest way that makes space for real presence. But clarity alone is not enough. Without boundaries, even the clearest values become vulnerable to exhaustion. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors with locks. They protect what is sacred. They say, this is who I am, and this is what I will allow. Too often, people feel drained not because they're weak, but because they've never learned how to protect their time, their energy, or their emotional space. Boundaries are acts of self-respect, and they are essential for peace. They allow us to say no without guilt, to rest without apology, to disagree without aggression. Setting boundaries is also a form of maturity. It requires us to understand that not everything can be fixed, not everyone will approve, and that's okay. As Epictetus taught, some things are up to us, and some things are not. Boundaries draw that line. They make life lighter not by reducing problems, but by refusing to carry what isn't ours to hold. The final element of this inner architecture is purpose. And contrary to what we're told, purpose doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be a perfect passion or a world-changing mission. Sometimes, it's as simple as waking up with the intention to be kind, to grow, to learn something, to be honest. Purpose gives structure to our days and strength to our choices. It connects even the most difficult experiences to something larger than pain itself. Without purpose, we drift. We chase things that never satisfy. But with even a modest sense of direction, we begin to experience life not as something happening to us, but something we are shaping from within. Purpose is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Because when life gets hard, and it always will, purpose reminds us why we keep going. It anchors us. It transforms struggle into growth. And when combined with clarity and boundaries, it becomes the foundation for a life that is not free of problems, but resilient in the face of them. After building clarity, boundaries, and a sense of purpose, we arrive at something that seems paradoxical, the idea of living lightly in a world that's often heavy. At first glance, it might sound like escapism, like a refusal to take life seriously. But the kind of lightness we're talking about here is the exact opposite. It's not avoidance. It's not denial. It's the weightless presence that comes from no longer needing everything to be perfect. It's the freedom that comes when you're not constantly measuring yourself, or comparing, or controlling outcomes. As Italo Calvino once wrote, lightness is not superficiality, but a way of being in the world based on the ability to see its weight. And that's the key. We live lightly not by closing our eyes, but by opening them fully. And still choosing to walk through life with softness, humor, and grace. There's a beauty in not making everything so personal. Not every delay is an insult. Not every silence is rejection. Not every moment of sadness is a sign that something's wrong. When we drop the narrative that life must constantly please us, we become more available to its subtle gifts. A ray of sun on the floor. A kind glance from a stranger. A quiet breath in the middle of a storm. Living lightly means becoming porous to the present, not needing to constantly fix or upgrade it. It means not waiting for the day when there are no more problems, because you've stopped making peace conditional. You're no longer negotiating with life. You're dancing with it. And yes, sometimes you stumble. Sometimes you fall. But the dance continues. And slowly, you realize, this, too, is part of the rhythm. But here's something deeper, living lightly also requires inner strength. It's not passivity, but poise. It's the result of having faced the darkness and choosing, still, to laugh. To love. To try again. Many mistake cynicism for maturity, but in truth, it takes far more courage to remain open in a world that hurts. To look around and still believe in connection, in beauty, in the power of small, good things. Lightness isn't carelessness, it's care without fear. It's standing in the rain without needing to curse the clouds. It's choosing joy without demanding certainty. It's remembering, as Viktor Frankl taught, that no matter what happens outside of us, we are still free to choose our attitude, our posture, our path. And that freedom, when claimed fully, makes life infinitely more bearable, perhaps even luminous. And so we come full circle. A problem-free life isn't a real destination, it's a marketing fantasy, a cultural mirage. But a life of depth, clarity, and lightness? That is real. That is human. That is possible. When we stop demanding that life remove all its rough edges, and start shaping the way we respond to them, something changes. We begin to live, not in spite of the problems, but in harmony with the imperfect nature of existence. We laugh even when things go wrong. We show up even when we feel afraid. We let go even when we'd rather hold on. And that kind of life, honest, flexible, meaningful, is far more beautiful than any polished dream of perfection. In the end, it's not about having no problems. It's about becoming the kind of person who no longer needs to be problem-free to feel deeply, fully alive.